Welcome in to Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I appreciate all of you coming and hanging out with me on what should be a really fun, illuminating, and hopefully helpful day on Outkick the Show. Tomorrow is the NFL Draft. We've got 4 NBA games going on tonight. We've got Game 7 between the Boston Bruins and the who are they playing? The Toronto Maple Leafs. Lots to get to, much to discuss. I want to give you the rundown here. We're going to talk about left-wing sports media blocking me when I dunk on them and why I think it shouldn't exist. I think you guys are going to enjoy this discussion because it's going to spiral directly into what brought this up today, which is your typical left-wing sports media column, which makes the argument, by the way, yes, I'm wearing my Aloha Bitches t-shirt in honor of Tua Tagovailoa's championship at Alabama, and also paying homage to my friends at Hawaii, the quarterback community, Marcus Mariota and Tua Tagovailoa. The NFL argument that they are racist against Lamar Jackson, why I think that is a ridiculous accusation, but also why I think if you make an accusation like that, you should have to be able to withstand people who disagree and tell you that your idea is idiocy. The NFL's meeting on the protest between the owners and players has been leaked to the New York Times, all 3 hours of it. Who was secretly taping this? What were they hoping to achieve? And why did they decide to leak it the day before the NFL draft? A lot of drama associated with that decision. And the NCAA basketball committee chaired by Condoleezza Rice has gathered and recommended a collection of several different rules that they would like to see changed in the college basketball universe. We will discuss all of that and more. I appreciate you for spending your Wednesday afternoon hanging out with us. I want to remind you, as always, 4 NBA games, an NHL Game 7, the NFL Draft starting tomorrow. Where's the best place to gamble? Well, if you go to sportsbookreview.com, you can make sure that you are well on your way to saving a bundle by getting the best possible deal anywhere on the internet. Make sure that you get hooked up with the best possible deal. Everybody's got different numbers. You don't know what it's going to be. Make sure that you take advantage of that, and you will be glad that you did. Also, thehomeloanexpert.com. Make sure if you are smart, you'll get out there and you'll save a bundle with my guy Ryan Kelly. He will ensure that you save a lot of money at thehomeloanexpert.com. Go to thehomeloanexpert.com, and if you get a mortgage in the next little bit, you will be able to guarantee that you can come to our event in Las Vegas, the Outkick the Weekend event that we are planning right now, that we will be hopefully announcing next week, that should lead to a lot of fun. All right, I tweeted this out earlier, and you guys know that I am a First Amendment absolutist. Did you also see the news out that men who look at boobs will live longer? I tweeted that out earlier. Lucky for you guys who love me, I'm going to live forever. For the haters out there, this is a tough blow to find out that me loving boobs is going to ensure that I'm able to live forever. And hopefully, if you join me in loving boobs, you're also going to be immortal one day. There is an interesting study out that says that if you stare at boobs, you're going to live longer if you are a man. Now, it doesn't surprise me at all. It also makes pornography basically the fountain of youth, which I think for a lot of you out there, you would say, hey, yeah, that makes sense. I've liked 21-year-old girls since I was 13 years old, and I'm 85 now, and guess what I still like? 21-year-old girls. So maybe 21-year-old girl boobs really are the fountain of youth. They certainly can spring anybody to attention and allow you to play the game of life. But I gotta say, for this, it's great for blood flow. I am a believer in the First Amendment and boobs. You guys know that. I said it on CNN. It's going to be in my new book. I'll discuss it. Part of the First Amendment, believing in the First Amendment is an easy thing to say. And one of the reasons why I say I believe in the First Amendment and boobs is because it makes people take notice of the First Amendment and also boobs. It's a little bit of a shocking combination. And if I just said, hey, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, people say things like that so much that they don't know what that actually means. And when I say I'm a First Amendment absolutist, I mean that you should be able to share any opinion that you have, and that other people out there should be able to have the opinion that they disagree with it. And in that debate, ultimately, the marketplace of ideas will win. That's an old school, old-fashioned view that would say, hey, I'm not going to run shrieking and dive into a corner when somebody uses a word I don't like, or that the number one best thing that can happen to me today is for me to be a victim, which is the way modern day society works. It used to be when I was a kid growing up, I was told that you never want to be a victim. You stand up to a bully and you throw a punch back at them. If someone treats you unfairly, you try to turn the other cheek and treat them better, or if at some point you're in danger of violence, you stand up to them and don't allow them to demean you. Now, everybody just runs into the corner, curls up in the fetal position, and demands protection anytime somebody says something remotely uncomfortable to them. And we have expanded the concept of what is acceptable and unacceptable speech to the point now where kids in college legitimately believe if they read a racial slur in Huckleberry Finn or in To Kill a Mockingbird, that is a direct assault upon them. Or that if they are reading the color purple and there's a rape scene, that is an assault upon them if they are a woman. The truth of the matter is this, and when I was told this as a kid, I thought everybody was told this as a kid, sometimes bad shit's going to happen to you. And part of being an adult and coming into adulthood is learning how to cope with bad shit happening to you without having to run and ask for help from somebody else. And I use this as an analogy because I'm talking about it in my book, and I've got a section of my book talking about this. If you remember the Mizzou protests, one of the things that happened in the Mizzou protests was a kid who was walking off campus claimed that somebody drove by him in a red pickup truck and yelled a racial slur at him. And he went to go talk to the president of the university, and he didn't think the president of the university was empathetic enough when he told him that story. And my mind was blown by this because I took myself back to college. And, I was in college from 97 to 2001, right at the bridge into the 21st century. I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. We were frequently off campus because our campus was basically locked into the city at large. Friends of all different racial and ethnic groups, religions, GW in Washington, D.C. in general is a diverse community. If I had been walking off campus and somebody had yelled a racial slur or a slur at one of my Jewish friends, an anti-Semitic slur, nobody would have thought, you know what we need to do? We need to go talk to the president and make sure that he will coddle our feelings. Because the president of the university at the time when I was in college, one, was really busy. Two, was not in the business of worrying about how people felt. And this is an interesting departure in life in general. And it's not just happening on college campuses, it's happening in media. Pay attention to how often you see media stories that don't actually focus on legitimate injuries, i.e., somebody beat me up, somebody did something to me because of my race or my gender or something else. Now we're focused on somebody did something and my feelings are hurt because of it. And a lot of times these things are like microaggressions, whatever the fuck that is. They don't actually exist. The media has moved in many respects from covering actual bad events, actions, things that happen that are bad, like just happened in Toronto, people got hurt, to covering people being upset over something that somebody said and legitimizing hurt feelings as a realistic and legitimate reason to write a story. And I bring all that up because I think it's an excessive attempt at protectionism that is actually working against allowing young people to become legitimate adults and legitimate individuals who are able to withstand somebody saying something mean to them and not immediately collapsing into the fetal position and demanding redress because somebody said something. Not even I was told sticks and stones when I was a kid. Sticks and stones, Sticks and stones may break my bones. That is a physical action, but words will never hurt me. Do parents not say that to kids anymore? fucking sack up. Don't be a pussy. Some people are going to say things that upset you in your life. Your job should not be to try to keep those people from ever speaking again. It should be to combat them in the marketplace of ideas. And so I bring this up. I'm going to get into this Lamar Jackson story and these other sports stories to begin with. But on Twitter right now, what I have noticed start to happen as my audience has grown is people who are on the far left wing in sports media. Jamel Hill, I'm using Pablo Torre, Sarah Spain, and Shannon Sharpe as examples. Far left wingers who are regularly sharing things that are untrue. For instance, yesterday, Shannon Sharpe went on Twitter and compared the Waffle House shooter to Meek Mill. Now, that is a flagrantly absurd comparison. The Waffle House shooter may get the death penalty. He will undoubtedly spend the rest of his life in prison. Shannon Sharpe said this guy's got bail that he can hit. It was a $2 million bail that was revoked. It was a procedural issue until he was actually charged with murder. He was not going to be able to leave jail. He compared him to Meek Mill. Well, Meek Mill was in jail because he violated his probation. That is not similar at all. If you violate your probation, you are being allowed out on parole. And if you violate your probation, you have to come back to jail. That's how it works. You have been convicted of a crime, and rather than have to serve out the entirety of your sentence, you are allowed to leave as long as you don't commit other offenses. If you commit other offenses, then you are brought back into the prison and you have to serve the rest of your time there. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was out on parole from prison, the last thing that I would do is in any way give a judge a reason to put me back into jail to serve the remainder of my sentence. Okay? Whether you agree or disagree with the Meek Mill process, when you get arrested for assault and you're out on parole, you're probably going to go back to jail. All right? You have a jail sentence to serve, and you have not completely served it. You were allowed out early. I believe that's the Meek Mill story. I haven't examined it in totality. But Shannon Sharpe is comparing a white guy to a black guy, and he's doing it in a flagrantly inauthentic way, much like Sean King does. And that is creating more racial tension and fomenting more racial division, because if you're upset with fake news with Donald Trump, you are sharing fake news if you're one of these sports figures. I have dunked on Shannon Sharpe a couple of times. Now, the dude went to Savannah State, so let's be honest. It's not hard for a Vanderbilt-trained lawyer to dunk on a Savannah State grad like Shannon Sharpe. I don't even know if Shannon Sharpe graduated, but he's got me blocked on Twitter because I dunked on him so hard. As any Vanderbilt lawyer would dunk on any football player from Savannah State, probably. Maybe they've had a genius who went to Savannah State and went on to Harvard Law School or Yale or Stanford or something like that. In general, putting me into a debate with Shannon Sharpe would be like me trying to play safety against him on the football field when he was at his peak at tight end. He would dunk on me on the football field. I would dunk on him in every other walk of life that has to do with intellectual debating, right? With logic, with trying to make arguments. He's not going to win any arguments with me, okay? So the reason why I bring this up is I am blocked right now on Twitter by Jamel Hill, Pablo Torre, Shannon Sharpe, and Sarah Spain. I'm probably blocked by other members of the sports media, but I notice this because occasionally these people will say stupid things which are not true, and one of you will share it with me, and when I click on the link in my DMs to see what they've said, I'm not allowed to see it. And I got this to say, as a First Amendment absolutist, I don't believe in Twitter. This is an advice for Twitter, because I know a lot of people at Twitter will actually end up watching this show on Periscope. I don't believe if you're going to give out blue check marks that you should allow verified blue check marks to block other verified blue check marks. Now, if the blocking function doesn't allow me to tag Jamel Hill or Shannon Sharpe or any of those people, I'm actually fine with that, because I can dispute their characterizations without needing to tag them. But if I'm not allowed to see what they tweet because they have blocked me, because I am making better arguments than they are, then that is a fundamental breakdown of the marketplace of ideas. And Twitter claims that it represents, at one time anyway, the free speech wing of the free speech party. This is a bad policy by by Twitter. All right. If you want to have a robust marketplace of ideas, which I do, then you should not allow people who are like me and out there in the public, and people like Jamel Hill and Shannon Sharp and Pablo Torre and Sarah Spain, who also have audiences, to not be able to see what they say. And by the way, I would say this across the board. If you're in politics and you cover Donald Trump, you shouldn't be able to be blocked by Donald Trump's Twitter account. I think that's a bad precedent to set. Even if Donald Trump doesn't like you, if you work at the New York Times or you work at CNN or you work at the Washington Post and Donald Trump hates you, he should not be able to block your Twitter account. So, because you write and engage in a daily political discourse. Does that make sense? And I also don't think that Donald Trump should be able to block, let's say, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Or I don't think that Donald Trump, and this goes both ways, right? I don't think that Senator Elizabeth Warren should be able to block Donald Trump. This is, to me, a fascinating window because I think what it creates is these silo chambers, which is, I think, one of the major issues that we have in the world today, and in particular in American politics. We have people who spend all day on social media who have cultivated their Twitter feeds such that they only are followed by people who agree with them all day long. And they never have to actually consider that their opinion might actually be wrong. It is tribalism. And if you think about tribalism, the danger with tribalism is that it eventually leads to extremism because you become convinced that your side is the only right side. And so if you are blocking someone, this is an interesting theory, blocking someone from seeing your public pronouncements, whether you are Donald Trump, a Republican right-wing president, in theory, at least according to his critics, or Jamel Hill, a far left-wing sports media activist, you shouldn't be able to do that. I think if you believe, like I do, in the robust marketplace of ideas, this is a fundamental rejection of the robust marketplace of ideas. You say, why does it matter? Well, we have this loser guy who wrote a column, which is absurd, arguing that Lamar Jackson would be the #1 overall pick. And yes, the answer is, by the way, yes, it leads to people like Sean King having voices. If you believe, like I do, that facts matter and that facts are important and that facts matter more than feelings, then you can't allow people to build entire careers predicated on falsely being predators, basically. Falsely being predators and preying on people's unreal fears by exacerbating those fears in a way that isn't legitimized by facts. That's a problem. And that leads to division, and it leads to disunity, and it leads to disloyalty. And if you claim, for instance, to care about black-white relations in this country, it actually makes it worse because it convinces people that there is no middle ground and that you either have to believe that all cops are evil or you have to believe that cops never do anything wrong. Plainly, those two things are not true, right? Most cops are good and most cops never do anything wrong. But some cops are racist and some cops do things that are wrong. You have to live. America and the world in general dwells in nuance. Social media dwells in hyperbole, one extreme or the other, and that extreme finds an audience, and then it makes a living, and then it becomes even more extremist. That's the truth. So that's why I'm troubled in general. That is a major issue that the country is facing right now. And I think it also exists in sports media. So the reason why this all kind of came to bear here is the truth of this is straightforward. This guy writes a column saying that Lamar Jackson is not being drafted #1 overall. The New York Daily News, the same place that employs Sean King. He says that Lamar Jackson's not being drafted because he's black. He says if he were white, he would be the #1 overall pick. Now, my position on this is straightforward. If you are making a racial argument in 2018, you are a fucking idiot. All right? You are making the same argument that Matthew McConaughey made in A Time to Kill, which was based on a John Grisham book in 1988. At the end of that movie, spoiler alert, Matthew McConaughey's Jake Brigant's character stands up and says, now close your eyes and imagine that she were white. And miraculously, 1988 Mississippi, when John Grisham wrote that book, was so racist that the people on the jury weren't aware that a child being raped was a bad thing until they realized that it might have been a white girl getting raped instead of a black girl getting raped. This story is insane when you really break it down. As if the jury was going to be like, no, this guy's not guilty, until they realized that a black child getting raped was a bad thing, right? The way that that story ends is so fundamentally racist that it probably could have only been written in 1988 Mississippi, which is when John Grisham wrote it. It's a great book, but it's a function, like all novels, of the world in which it was set. 2018 America is not 1988 Mississippi. Arguing that Lamar Jackson would be the #1 overall draft pick if he were white is insanely dumb. For this reason alone, Jamarcus Russell, Jameis Winston, and Michael Vick, and who else is out there? Cam Newton have all been drafted #1 overall as black quarterbacks in the 21st century. There have been 7 white quarterbacks in the 21st century drafted #1 overall. There have been 4 black quarterbacks. And some of you are telling me, I'm not going to argue with them, that Sam Bradford is a Native American and that he's not technically a white guy. I don't know the blood test of DNA of Sam Bradford, but if that is true, then we can also take out Marcus Mariota, who was drafted, I guess, #2 overall. Whatever you want to say, regardless, 7, 4, and 1. The NFL is a meritocracy. And VY was the 3rd pick. He was the 1st overall quarterback taken that year. The NFL is a meritocracy. The NFL picks the best possible player. If you run an NFL franchise and you believe that Lamar Jackson is being discriminated against because he's black, guess what? You should be ecstatic, because that would mean that you would get an incredible player at a lower value. Because if you were not racist, then you would be able to take advantage of all the other racists that are out there, right? If I ran a franchise and my goal was to win as many games as I possibly could, then I would hope that other teams were biased, racist, all these other isms and ists that would lead me as a clear-eyed non-racist to be able to take advantage of their stupidity. These arguments, which happen all the time, I believe deserve to be ridiculed, okay? Which is why I immediately tweeted in response, but where would Jamarcus Russell, Jameis Winston, Cam Newton, and Michael Vick have been drafted if they were Asian? If you switch it to any other race, you realize how fucking ridiculous it is to argue in 2018. The NFL has issues. Primarily that its players get the shit knocked out of them and don't have any functional brains by the time they get to be 60 years old. But everybody gets the shit knocked out of them evenly, and they get well compensated to do it. The argument that the NFL is racist is absurd, because if it were, then wouldn't racism play out everywhere? You know who would be the most racially discriminated against? White cornerbacks, Asian cornerbacks, Hispanic cornerbacks. You know, there hasn't been somebody of a different race start at corner other than black since Jason Sehorn in the 1990s. That seems to me to be insanely racist, that only 12% of the American population would take all 64 cornerback jobs every single year. How about the kickers? How many field goal kickers are black? Is that racism? The best man gets the job in the NFL. And if you do a better job picking the best men, guess what? You win championships. This is a great example. It's in my book. Bill Belichick, I think, has exploited this. Bill Belichick, I think, saw that white wide receivers were not respected in the NFL, and he was able to go sign all these white wide receivers and get them for lower cost than he would have if they were black guys. People saw Danny Amendola and Wes Welker and Chris Hogan and all these other guys who were otherwise white wide receivers running 4.3s and 4.4s, Julian Edelman. And he said, you know what? I can bring these guys in and save money on them because they're white and nobody else is going to sign them, Danny Woodhead, and I'm going to be able to take advantage of it. And I think Bill Belichick exploited an inefficiency in the market that was predicated on white wide receivers. Okay? Think about it. I genuinely believe that Bill Belichick has exploited that. If that were the case with quarterbacks, wouldn't there be a franchise out there that was saying, oh, Lamar Jackson would be number one on the board if he were white. Let's go get him at 11, and we'll be able to exploit this inefficiency predicated on racism. The NFL is about ruthlessly exploiting inefficiency like any other business. The truth of the matter is this. Lamar Jackson has not proven that he can stand in the pocket and make consistent throws downfield. Just like Tim Tebow hadn't proven it, another Heisman Trophy winner. Just like Eric Crouch, another Heisman Trophy winner, who, by the way, got shifted to the defensive backfield rather than get to play quarterback, even though he had won the Heisman Trophy at the position of his choice. If that's not racist, I don't know what is. But again, these arguments of just change the race are insanely dated, they are broken, and yet they are all too common in modern sports media. Everybody out there should be able to respond and react and denigrate decisions like these that are being made and argued. The reality is everybody can't, because if you're like me and you've been dunking on people, you start to get blocked. If you guys hadn't shared me this New York Daily News article, the writer blocked me the minute that I started to point out the flaw in his logic. The best part of the flaw of his logic is he cites Patrick Mahomes being drafted before Deshaun Watson. Guess what? Patrick Mahomes is half black. So it must be that the racists out there in the NFL, they must have loved the half-white part of Patrick Mahomes to pick him over Deshaun Watson. Here's the truth. So quarterbacks are tough to project. Sometimes good quarterbacks get drafted late, like Tom Brady, like Drew Brees, like a lot of other guys out there, Dak Prescott. It's not happening because of their race. It's happening because those guys end up being better than the scouts anticipated. Everybody is looking for the next great quarterback, regardless of what color he is and regardless of even what gender he is. If Bill Belichick could find a midget transgender lesbian who played quarterback better than Tom Brady, guess what? That midget transgender lesbian would be under center next year for the New England Patriots. It's about who's better, not what they look like or where they're from. It's what America should aspire to be. The best man gets the job in the NFL, and that should happen every damn place in this country. Okay, the NFL meeting on protest leaked. Back in October, all the NFL owners got together, or a large majority of them, I'm not sure, got together, as well as all the players, and they sat around and they debated the protest issue. I think what happened is a player, maybe Eric Reed, who showed up in a Colin Kaepernick t-shirt over his suit, which is insanely ridiculous to have done. I think the NFLPA or a player taped this and then leaked it in an effort to embarrass the owners on the day before the combine, and also to help Colin Kaepernick in his deposition, arguing that he deserves a job. Here's the truth. Here is the truth of the matter. You don't have a right to get a job. Every business in America, if they think you're bad for business, can make the decision not to hire you. I don't have a right to be employed by ESPN, even though I'm the best at what I do in the entire industry right now. Right? Think about it. How many people are doing better writing, better radio, better Periscope, better Facebook, better Twittering in the entire sports media industry right now? And there's definitive proof in my ratings to reflect that what I said is true. That doesn't mean that ESPN has to hire me. ESPN can decide that they don't believe that I am good for their business. Just like Fox Sports Radio can decide that I am good for their business. And just like I can decide to start my own business. You can be good at something and not the right fit for a company because they disapprove of things that you might have said. Everybody out there arguing that Colin Kaepernick deserves a job, would they make the same argument that ESPN is bound to have to hire me? Would they argue that Fox and CBS and NBC also have to hire me? I'm indisputably speaking to a big audience that's underserved every day. I'm making millions of dollars a year doing it for companies and for myself. Yet you wouldn't argue that any of those companies have an obligation to have to hire me to work in their sports media companies. You wouldn't make that argument. And nobody out there is making the argument that the guys at Barstool Sports who got fired because they didn't like some of the tweets that they had sent represented a bad move by ESPN, other than being a bad move in general. They're not saying ESPN didn't have the right to not employ them, right? You can look at the content that somebody has produced and decide that you don't want to hire them because it's bad for your business, right? Think about it. Yet, I don't think there's anybody out there that would dispute right now the most money-making podcast in America, I believe, direct podcast, is Pardon My Take with Barstool Big Cat and PFT. I like both those guys. I'm not a podcast guy. I don't listen to podcasts, but I respect what those guys have built. Yet nobody out there would say, hey, these guys definitely have the best podcast. ESPN has to hire them. All of you would say, well, they or their company might have said things that ESPN thinks are a bad look for them. Now, you don't have to agree with it necessarily, but you might have to acknowledge that that's true, right? Why would that same logic not apply for the NFL? Every single employer has the right to decide that an employee is a bad decision for their brand. And if you lead to less revenue or less butts in the seats or less ratings in television for your employer, then you're probably not going to be able to hire that person. This is crazy. I think that players have no concept for how business works. And that's one of the big disconnects here. If you're bad for somebody's business, it doesn't matter how good you are at your individual talent. They don't have an obligation to hire you. The best filmmaker in America right now might well be Woody Allen. A lot of places aren't going to hire Woody Allen right now because he's toxic because of the allegations made against him involving his children, and the fact that he married his adopted daughter. Those are pretty toxic things. Nobody out there is arguing that somebody has to give Woody Allen millions of dollars to make a film. If you are bad for business, then that is the truth. And the business has no obligation to hire you no matter how talented you are. That's the truth. Finally, NCAA basketball recommendations are out. I'm going to hit these quickly. And we'll probably talk about them a little bit on the show tomorrow as well. My radio show airs 6 to 9 a.m. On nationwide. The NBA should eliminate the one-and-done rule by allowing players to enter the NBA draft out of high school or any college season. I agree with that rule. It has no benefit or basis coming from the NCAA. That's the NBA Players Association, which determines their own eligibility rules. I'm of the opinion that if you're over 18, you should be able to make a living doing anything that you want in the world of sports. You can do it in hockey, you can do it in tennis, you can do it in baseball. I think you should be able to do it in the NBA and college and the NFL. That's your choice. You can take that risk. I don't think that age restrictions should be allowed. But to be fair to the NCAA, they can make this recommendation, but it's not their rule that made one and done a reality. They should be allowed to go straight to the NBA, just like LeBron James was, just like Kobe Bryant, everybody else. All right. If you are 18, you should be able to go to the league. Right. I also feel like, by the way, if you are 18, you should be able to buy a beer. That's another story. But if you're old enough to join the military and walk around and carry a gun and get shot at, you should be able to walk into a bar and have a damn beer. All right, that's my personal opinion. Once you reach the age of a majority, and for people out there who say, well, 18-year-olds are too young to go into the leagues, that's their choice. I never hear anybody say 18-year-olds are too young to go into the Marines. If we're willing as a country to allow 18-year-olds to join the military, to join the Navy, to immediately get into basic training and get shipped overseas and get shot at, then I got no problem with an 18-year-old deciding that he wants to try to make a living as a professional athlete. You either make it or you don't. That's life. And I don't think we're in the business, the values judgment of making decisions for other people. Once you're 18, for better or worse, you are able to make adult decisions. Those can be bad decisions. Lots of you out there watching me right now or listening to me have made bad decisions when you're 18. But hopefully you learn from those bad decisions, and by the time you're 28 or 38 or 48, you're making better decisions. That's part of life. If undrafted, a player can return to school. I like that too. Stiffer penalties for rule breakers, which can lead to a lifetime ban. We kind of have that already. I don't think Rick Pitino is ever going to get to coach again. If you do enough wrong, then you're probably going to get banned. Allow and encourage access to certified agents to high school and college players to produce more informed decisions. Amen. Amen. I think that if you are considering going pro, you should be able to go out and negotiate with any agent that you want to. Think about how laughable this would be in other areas. Imagine if you told 18-year-old Taylor Swift that she couldn't have the best agent she wanted. Or if you told 18-year-old Jennifer Lawrence that she couldn't have the best agent to negotiate movie roles for her. Everybody should get the best possible information they can to allow them to make the best possible decision. And also to limit the influence of frequently guys or girls who have no idea what they're talking about. Your Uncle Joe, who thinks you're the best player ever and has not even seen any of the other best players. He's just pumping you up. All right. I love all of you. If you enjoyed this show, share it with your friends. That's how we're growing so rapidly. We just added Chicago on the radio markets. Go check my Twitter feed if you're in the Chicago area and you want to start listening. Big time addition to the show to roll up Chicago. Encourage you to go check out Sportsbook Review. 4 NBA games tonight, 1 Game 7 in the NHL. Also prop bets for the NFL at sportsbookreview.com. And if you need a mortgage, go get one at thehomeloanexpert.com. I am Clay Travis. Thanks for hanging with us. We'll be live tomorrow, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. DBAT, boys and girls. Don't be a pussy. See y'all.